Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Robyn Henderson and I have the privilege of introducing Julie Ashton. Let me tell you a little bit about Julie. She is an experienced trainer, coach and mentor for business owners and coaches in both personal and business skills. Julie has worked with many high-profile companies and businesses during her 30 years experience. She holds multiple teaching, training, coaching and assessment accreditations, and she has a unique talent for simplifying complex processes and concepts while identifying and implementing practical strategies for her clientele. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Robyn.
Now today I'm going to interview you about how to move from original idea to starting a successful business in 90 days. Now, where do we start? Let's talk about business structure. What can you tell us about business structure?
Well, the interesting thing with this is that most people don't realise they even have a choice between setting up either a sole trader or a company setup or even a partnership and what the difference is. So it's really good. This is very important to get this right from the beginning as to depending on what you project your business to be able to do. So what I recommend is get some really good professional advice so that you know the difference. Some questions to ask your accountant, like what's the difference between the structures, what are the tax implications, and if you're buying a franchise, what kind of setup costs and so on, what structure do you need. It's very important to get good professional advice on this before you even start.
And the accountant would be basing that on previous history and because they know our financial situation. So, yeah, very sound advice. And Julie, what about a business name? How do we register that?
Well, the interesting thing is I've learned just recently that registering a business name is not as simple as jumping onto a government website and registering your name. These days you've got to do a business search first to see if that name that you want is possible. You've got to also check if you want to have a company, whether there's a company or whether there's a registered business, and this will again depend on your structure, whether you're a sole trader or a company. There are resources such as the ABR, which is the Australian Business Register, where you can check that. The main thing is to get operational, you've got to have a registered business before you can set up a bank account. So do your research, come up with a half a dozen or so names that you want, and then do your ABR search so that you can see if the business name you want is available and if you can register it.
And does that take long to come through once you've actually applied? Once you've checked out if you can have that name?
Yeah, it takes about 2 weeks. Up to 2 weeks is what they say.
Okay.
Yep. Takes about 2 weeks. You can submit it fairly quickly, but it does take a little time for it to come through. You can go into the Department of Fair Trading and pay and register over the counter, but again, do your search first to see if your name is available.
Right. Okay. Good advice. Now, what about a website? Do you register a .com or a .com.au? What's most effective?
Look, there's a couple of schools of thought here. This again comes down to what you want your business to do. If you're planning to have an international audience and an international business, do your best to get a .com. You can register a .com by going to a couple of simple websites like Crazy Domains to just register your .com if that's what you want. If you're planning to just be a local regional business, there's nothing wrong with a .com.au. The challenge is these days you've got to have your business name registered before you can get your .com.au registered, because the government has now put controls in place to ensure that your .com.au title represents the services you're offering. So it's a bit of a catch-22 whether to do the .com.au or do the business name, but do the business name first, and then get your .com.au registered real quick.
And that's good that it is covered with the .com or the .com.au, because otherwise someone else could have your name and you've got into all the trouble of getting the business name. So yeah, it is a good idea, even though it's a bit fiddly at the start.
Yeah.
So what about when you've got the website? Do you use a graphic designer to get the web design, or what's the best way there? What do you do?
Look, it depends on your budget. If you've got a big budget, by all means get a good IT web person to develop the website, get a good graphic designer to put your structure together. But ideally, most people don't have a huge budget to do that. And ideally what you need is someone who's got a combination of web development skills, as well as for the practical functional side, as well as graphic design skills to make it look great. So get some you know, hunt around a little bit, ask some really good questions and ask to see some examples of their work so that you can see if it's functional and if it looks good and if they're up to date with their practices. Ask them, you know, what courses they've done recently, things like that. So shop around, because the price
Yep.
can vary from 500 to 30,000 depending on what you need to do.
Wow.
Yep.
And then it's important to get it all in writing, isn't it? Just exactly what they're going to do for you. So there's no, I'm going to build a website. Well, what, you know, their idea of a website, your idea of a website can be quite different.
Yep.
So make
Yep.
sure you get it in writing so you tick everything off.
Yep.
Okay, so GST, now what do we do there?
Well, GST...
do we need to register?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because, again, it comes down to getting good advice. There is a limit now that if you, I think the limit now is $75,000. So if you expect your gross income to be less than that for the financial year, you don't need to register for GST. Again, though, get great advice because it will depend on what you project your income to be, what your business plan is to get that income, and where you expect it to be. So you need to get some advice, but you do have choices. So if you're just doing a little part-time business for a little bit of extra cash flow, it's not going to generate a huge amount. You don't need to register. But if you are going to register and you expect the projection of income to be quite high, get it registered, get it set up properly and outsource it to your accountant to manage. Don't waste your time trying to figure it out. It's not what you're paid to do. What you need to do is be focusing on income sources, not what happens with the money. So get your accountant to do it for you.
And that would also, you'd get the advice around managing your cash flow, because you seem to be, when you start a business, you seem to, all the money go out, but you don't seem to be getting a lot in initially. So again, getting good advice on that, you'd recommend?
Absolutely. I know when I first set up my first business, my accountant gave me some fantastic advice and set me up with a very good structure, and it meant that for the first 5 years of my business I didn't have to pay anything in tax or GST because of the way we set it up. It was all perfectly legal, nothing illegal, I promise. It was just the way we set up, how I funded the business and how I recovered those funds in the business, which basically meant that the first couple of years no tax was paid, which helped with the cash flow enormously.
Sure, yeah, because that's a big thing, isn't it? The cash flow's king. All right, so what about marketing? I mean, and we're touching on these things really. Like, they're big areas, and I'm conscious that, you know, we're just giving sort of a couple of minute answers, but you do drill down when you work with people and go much deeper, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. When I do a consultation with a client, we'll look at all of these things and get some basic key steps established. Because when you're starting up your business, you've got a couple of things you've got to really get sorted. There's the admin side, like we said, the business structure, the business name, the GST, but you really need to be putting most of your energy, especially in the first few weeks, into developing your website, developing your products, and marketing. You've got to spend so much energy on your marketing, and you need a plan. A plan can be very simple. We're not talking about a 20-page document or anything. We're talking about a very simple, what's your niche, how will you find your clients, and how will your product service those clients, what benefits do they get from it. So there's a couple of key things you need to know. So your marketing plan can be as big or as small as your budget, but there are key things like your niche and the benefits to your clientele for your product.
And you just work through those systematically, and that, as you say, that's where you put the bulk of your energy.
Yeah, especially
so
at the beginning.
What about the products? Yes. What about the products? What will you sell and how do you charge that? Is that another area that you go into?
Yeah, because you need to understand your niche market and your target market. You need to probably do a little bit of research into the demographics to know what's the best price to sell your product at. And the key thing is, especially when it ties back to marketing, is sometimes you might have to spend some time at the beginning developing your product to sell to your market. You need to know what your benefits for your clientele are in order to be able to successfully get it to market quickly. So, and that comes down to knowing the charges, what competition's out there. You've got to have a fairly good price.
Yeah, to take care of all your overheads and just not lose money on any of your sales. No point getting the sales, but not make any money out of them.
That's right. You've got to make a profit.
So, yes, you want to keep going. So planning versus action. What are the mistakes that we make there? Planning versus action.
Look, in all honesty, this is probably the one area where people get stuck and often don't get their business off the ground. I've seen a lot of people take 2 to 5 years to put the perfect plan together and never actually get it off the ground. I've seen others do the opposite and get out there and just sell, sell, sell without any planning whatsoever. I've seen both succeed and I've seen both fail. The key to really getting your business off the ground is how to balance both, where you need to plan and where you need to take action, how you focus your activities and your energy on your income producing activities, outsource the key things from the beginning that are going to take up time that you don't need to waste time on. And again, it comes down to budget and your business plan and all of that sort of thing. But you don't need a massive business plan. You don't need a huge budget. You just need to have a good idea of what your product is and who wants it. And from there, you can easily get something off the ground. My very first business, I just spent 90 days. All I did, I had a list, I had a phone, I had a diary, and all I did was offer free consultations until I had enough sales to make it profitable, and that's all I did. But that took some initial planning to get that 100 name list and to have something to do in that first session and learning from each one to improve the sales.
And then it's really a time management thing, isn't it? So you don't get distracted during the day. Because a lot of these businesses, I'd imagine people would be starting from home and just sort of kicking off and before they necessarily go into an office, or if they ever do. So part of that, time management is such an important part.
Time management is absolutely critical all the way through the business, but particularly at the beginning. If you are like most people, you're doing a small startup business, you've got a limited budget, you've probably got 2 to 3 months to get it off the ground, your time management is the absolute key to how you get the most out of every single day. I've done this with so many people, just sat down and worked out, right, exactly, here's what your tasks are that you must do every single day, what's critical to be done, what's nice to have if you've got time, and get it done. So time management, critical.
So I guess that that ties in, Julie. I know you've got the 3 biggest mistakes people make when they're starting a business. You've got that free webinar coming up. I guess time management is going to feature predominantly in that webinar. Would that be?
Yeah, what we're going to,
the case?
That's right. What we're going to talk about in that webinar is we're going to touch on some of these things, but we're going to look at the 3 key mistakes people make and how those things are actually those 3 steps that we're going to talk about, how you can use those 3 steps to build your business very quickly. And we're going to discuss this in some depth in the webinar, how to learn from those mistakes and make the most of your time by just focusing on 3 key things.
And what's the webinar valued at, Julie? I know you've got a free offer, but what's it valued at when you do charge?
Yeah, normally when I run webinars, we charge anything from $350 to $550. This one, because it's taking a fair bit of my time, is valued at around $550. For listeners of this podcast, we're offering that for free. And you can get more information. I've got a website set up to take registrations, which is www.howtorunbusiness.com.au. Or you can simply email me at info@unisontraining.com, or we've also got a toll-free number for Australian callers, 1300 631 137. Any of those contacts, you will find out more about that particular webinar, and that's completely free to listeners of this podcast.
Fantastic. Can I just have that website again?
Yep, the website is www.howtorunbusiness.com.au.
howtorunbusiness.com.au. The call 1300 631 137 or info@unisontraining. That's U-N for Nelly, I-S-O-N for Nelly, training.com. Fantastic. Okay, Julie, thank you very much for your time today. I think we've given the listeners lots of ideas about how to move from the original idea to starting a successful business in 90 days. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Robyn, and I look forward to seeing you again.